It's my pleasure to introduce my good friends, the collaborators, and our panellists, Brad Dawn, Alex Longley, and Liam Hart. If guys want to come up to the stage, and I'll introduce you. Brad Dawn is the design lead and senior associate at Spillard-Lease Partnership. His design purpose expertise in complex projects has been honed over 20 years of diverse industry experience in sectors such as commercial, infrastructure, multi-residential, student housing, education and health. He's resulting in multiple award-winning projects. His holistic design approach delivers exceptional architecture from early design concepts, design development, and through the construction, procurement and delivery. Brad sees his role as an architect as creating vibrant and engaging environments that enhance human connection to place. Recently, he's led BLP's Design with Country framework, working collaboratively with traditional owners and project stakeholders to instill a country-centric design approach throughout project stages. He's a good mate of mine. I enjoy working with Brad, and it's really great to see Brad's joining VLP and just adding a different dimension to our design skills. Alex Longwood is our landscape architect on the panel. Alex founded Arcadia Landscape Architects in 2011 and has led the practice to become a leader in designing with country through engagement and collaboration with Indigenous communities and practitioners across Australia. Working closely with First Nations knowledge holders, traditional custodians and owners, Alex designs help embed a deeper understanding of our land and its stories in landscape architecture. With a reputation for design leadership and exemplary project delivery, Alex's experience includes health, aged care, mixed-use precincts, civic spaces, education, transport, defence and sports rec facility projects. Is there anything you don't do, Alex?
Architecture.
Thank you to that. Enough architects in the room, I think. And he's well known for well-considered and well-communicated concepts and outcomes that exceed client expectations. And the other non-architect on the panel, Liam Hart, is a saltwater freshwater man from the Dunghutti area of coastal northern New South Wales. He's the founder and chief executive officer of JIRA Advisory, I always do that, with extensive experience in education, government, private, renewables and health, all within the First Nations community context. Liam serves as a board member of the South Eastern Sydney Local Health District and New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce. And I've had the privilege of working with Alex and Liam on a number of projects at BLP, and I'm looking forward to what they have to say. So this panel discussion, not surprisingly, incorporates views from the architect, landscape architect and Indigenous engagement consultant, examining inclusions within the design for elements that go beyond artwork to include facade materials and colours, site hydrology, fan selection and placement, circulation pathways and building themes. I'm going to take a seat and start some questions. Can switch to the microphone, which is working, yay. So Liam, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, you go, mate.
So I want to get some commentary from you around where you feel this focus on design for country has come from, because it does seem a little bit new. It's something that's really come into power in the last 5 years or so. Can you talk a little bit about other services where this kind of Indigenous engagement started?
I think for me, clinician background, health for a long time. First time that I came across these concepts was, and in health, all things old and new again, but around patient-centered care about 8 years ago with South East Sydney LHD. What they were looking at were best model practices, and one of them was the Nooka models of care based in Alaska, which were really relationship driven, but there was elements of lifting the cultural capability of a place, and we started to see some early designs of what a more capable, a more culturally capable place for healing would look like. So I think that's where I first saw those elements. About 5 years ago, I was at the University of Sydney. We did Walanga Wingara design principles, which was originally a framework for bringing together indigenisation of the curriculum at the University of Sydney. But that what we saw is that got applied to the built environment. They saw that at the Chow Chak Wing Museum, and then of course the Susan Wackill Health Building. So I think it really started to emerge from there.
And I will just give a plug. Susan Wackill Building is one of BLP's. Come on, you know how to do it. So, look, a question for each of you. Indigenous engagement has become somewhat mandatory on government and some private projects. To differing levels, we find, depending on who we're working with and the individuals involved in our government projects, some are more inclined to want greater inclusion than others. So I'm going to ask, because obviously you're all sitting here because Indigenous cultural design is important to you. So why is it important? Why do you think we should design with a focus on cultural design? And what work are you doing at the moment that particularly focuses on it? So Brad, I'm gonna throw to you first.
Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks. It's good to see you all. Look, first and foremost, I think it's the right thing to do. We've probably been operating in a landscape where, and particularly potentially it's part of the early education was to get in the architecture field, where we were taught a particular methodology to analyse sites and understand the environment itself. But we're now moving into a space where we really need to understand more about the cultural identity of a place. And that's been really important in particularly understanding how to, develop our theories and concepts further. So ultimately, that was really the important factor of being able to really understand these key goals and achieve those outcomes in the project.
And Alex?
Yeah, it's Arcadia sort of embarked on designing this country a better part of a decade ago. We were working on a site where we really felt we needed to engage with an Indigenous landscape architect, and found at that point in time that there wasn't a single operating design landscape architect who was Indigenous in Australia. And the problem that really presents is there's a few different dimensions to it. Obviously, there's a huge emphasis today on sustainability, and First Nations people have been caring for country for eons, and the management of land, starting from bushfire to the water systems and the whole way through, is really something that we've still got a lot to learn from. Then we come through to what I've seen as a really significant uplift in the desire for people to want to know more about First Nations culture and their significance to what the land is and how that changes from region to region. So the educational component and the desire for the population across Australia to be part of that has significantly shifted in the last decade. And it's only the most recent census that you sort of see a really big spike in people identifying as Indigenous in Australia. And for me, that's a representation of them being proud and comfortable about the culture that they come from. And that's relative to society supporting and wanting to be part of that knowledge and to grasp it. So there's an opportunity for design, landscape specifically from our perspective, to be part of the champion that takes that knowledge and integrates it within the fabric of the landscape language and storytelling and narrative that really sort of provides us with a canvas to be able to put that on the ground and to share that with people. And then finally, I think that there's a spiritual component, sky country, earth country, and country itself. It's a fantastic element for us to be able to ground our design on, and to be able to talk about placemaking that we all sort of have been listening to for the last decade is around building fabric and around rituals and cultural sort of examples that have been happening within that municipality or whatever it is for, say, the last 100 years or 200 years in Australia. But ultimately, we've got a culture that has, thousands and thousands of years of cultural language and experience to be able to share with a population who's very young and hungry to know more.
Yeah, exactly. And Liam, you don't have to just mention architecture projects. You can talk about other stuff as well if you like.
I think just adding to that point, I'm closer to 50 now, and it took a long time for me to be
Oh,
comfortable.
you're doing a good day over 35.
But I suppose that's an element of the environment. When I was younger in the 70s and 80s, where your level of comfort to identify as an Aboriginal person, you hear those stories about kids who were told to say that they were Italian or others. So, but in regards to some of the other projects we're doing, we do a lot in the renewable sector, so both on and offshore. For us, if you think about an asset, so proponents will be building their assets. It's the life cycle of the asset. So you get a sugar hit of the design and construction phases, but there's operations and maintenance phases. So one of the ones I'm doing is a pumped hydro, an internal pumped hydro with a lifespan of 100 years. If business goes well, my grandkids will do the decommissioning.
Yeah.
But the decommissioning is part of the project. Is how do you return the asset back to country? Materiality elements like that. Like what is the lifespan and the repatriation of that waste after the building's gone?
What I find really interesting is, as health designers, we talk a lot about solidogenics and biophilia, and the whole idea of connection to nature and being able to see green space and being able to see outside what the sky is doing, what the weather is like, all of those kinds of things, and those things are all intrinsically connection with country pieces. And so it's really what really interests me is that if we shut up and listen to other people for a change, and if we listen to our First Nations people, they're actually telling us stuff that we're now finding out is evidence-based design. And really it's coming from just experience of being on the land and working with country. So look, a lot of projects focus on the inclusion of Indigenous art as a way of connecting with country. In fact, some projects only include Indigenous art as a way of connecting with country. We know that is important. Art is a big part of the cultural identity of Indigenous Australians. But when we talk about a connection with country, it's important to allow stronger engagement, particularly with external landscape spaces. That's why you're here, Alex. So what are the opportunities you see within landscaping to provide this connection? So, Alex, I'll throw to you first.
Thank you. Where do you see that narrative that's about place that comes from community is really important to unpack? And Lam and I are working on a project at the moment in Appin Greenfield site, and it's got a lot of thorough business to go through there. But it's the narratives that I'm trying to work with Lam to get out of the community so that we can take that and put that into the design. If I look at a project that we've completed, that we've done it, I think, really successfully, and also spread across the community as a full spectrum. It's Warringah Park in Finland. It's Australia's first overrail park. And we worked with Uncle Dennis Foley as the elder of the area, and really sort of unpacked what was important to the Lane Cove National Park. And for whatever reason, or for multiple reasons, it was the Banksia flower, and the Old Man Banksia was the narrative that Warringah, being Banksia, has depicted. Now, there's multiple elements and layers of that throughout the actual design, but probably the most significant pieces are the play structures that are sort of 8 to 9 metres in height, sitting at the end of the park, that depict the 3 different life cycles of the flower. So a child who's 4 engages with that, but I've heard grandparents walking around, shaking their children, working out what the whole structure looks like. And then the language and Wanagari, then that starts to become part of the narrative. And then there's other pieces of art that are integrated into the design that are a lot more subtle than these big, bright play elements. But it's the cultural sort of storytelling that really sort of unpacks really what the narrative is about and sharing that with the community.
Yeah, it's great. Liam, What does it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
I think, Alex, you're spot on around peeling back those layers. So peeling back those layers that we see in an urban environment right back to what would have been there prior. There's a number of projects we've done where we know them to be low-level areas, so would have been water gathering areas. And so what is that whole experience of being there? So is it a soundscape? Is there certain flora and fauna that is native to that area that you would recognize immediately, that you know where you are and where it is that you're standing? And for me, when I try and describe what a connection to the country feels like, I liken it to, when I get down the coast on a Friday with the kids, we get down and I finally get to the beach and I walk there and the water's cold and I feel it on my toes, but I smell the sea, I can hear it. And even if I close my eyes, I know exactly where I am. So that for me is what it physically feels like.
Yeah, and I mean it is that total sensory experience, and I think we often forget that. We often just go, okay, well it's something visual, so we'll put some art on the wall, but it is well beyond that. It is those sights and those sounds, and the Bathurst Hospital project that we're all working together on. There used to be a waterway that ran through the site. And part of the landscape design for the project was to bring back a water source and to have that running water, and to look at how we use the stormwater, roof collected stormwater, to bring that running water back through. So we're pushing to get that to happen. We'll see how we go. Obviously everything's a bit tight at the moment. So Brad, I'm going to just throw to you quickly to answer that question.
Now, look, it's very interesting as a design professional to, I guess, immerse yourself in each of the different countries, and we've worked across many different countries. And first and foremost, it's about listening and respectfully listening, so and genuinely engaging with the process and really caring about the objectives that you're hearing about, particularly from the community consultation sessions. You then unpack where you can and redesign and reinterpret those ideas wherever possible to align with those particular goals. It's not necessarily only ever about one particular move. Every time that we do have sessions with particular elders or particular working groups, it's not necessarily only about Code 4. It's not necessarily only about colour or landscape, or it's about connection to scope and feel, etc. It's a multitude of different aspects and social agendas, and a range of diverse opinions in the room, a range of diverse thinking, particularly understanding and hearing the realities and the tragedy, etc., and absorbing that as best as a group, and we're interpreting those into a design that is fit for its purpose to serve the community. And that's been a really important part of what we do at VLP, is that it's listening first before you pen, it's listening first before you even talk about design concepts or design strategy, etc. It's really about understanding and really knowing what the community want as a whole. Unfortunately, we can't deliver the service outcomes all the time that they are asking us to be, I guess, have an opinion on. We can really help to for those design outcomes, which are ultimately really important part of creating those welcoming environments for Indigenous communities and First Nations peoples.
And I think one of the things that we, as architects, we can't go in there with an agenda. We can't go in there going, oh, this is what I'm going to get out of this session, because you never get what you go in is there for. And I know in Bathurst, some of the best information we got was just listening to the stories of the place and what was going on the site, and And half the time it was like, oh, that's amazing. We could do this and we could do this. And it's like, yeah, we're not going to use that stuff yet. You've got to win the trust, and you've got to, rather than just hear a story and take that story away and do something with it. But it's a gift that is given to you, and it's a gift that you're entrusted with these stories. And half the time you can get really excited about we can do the story, and we've got to remember that we can't just take. We've got to work with and keep working with and developing things that the community is happy for us to use. And in some cases, it's not the great story that we want to use. It is, it is a development and a relationship, and it's a relationship that's going to be ongoing throughout all the stages of the project, not just the early design stages. And I think that's important to remember too, is it doesn't stop at the consultation phase. The consultation phase goes into delivery and it goes into construction. And the work we saw this morning, it's got to be appropriate for what's on the site and for what the people who live and understand country will have.
I think I'll just add to that. It's really important when going through these workshops that you have a set of Indigenous cultural intellectual property agreement or an understanding of how it is that you will use the outcomes of the workshops.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were, with Bathurst, I know we were pretty handily advised by yourself there, Len, just to say, look, you can't take it. You've got to be gifted it.
I think the other element, which is really important, especially in health projects, because quite often we'll work on one stage and then 10 years later there'll be another, is that relationship and that trust that's developed by one group of consultants is often handed on to the next that comes in with the same traditional owners or traditional custodians. So our custodianship as the development of the site needs to be consistent and considerate, I suppose, of people that follow after it, so that we don't just get all the information and wrap it into our designs and think that we've done a fantastic job and leave the traditional owners feeling as though they haven't been taken and cared for part of the journey the whole way through, and leave the next set of designers and groups that come in with a group of people that are feeling like their trust has been broken and they've got so much good homework to do.
Yeah. Look, we know that construction costs at the moment are going through the roof. And we've all been, I'm sure everybody in this room has been subject to budget cuts and value management exercise after value management exercise. We love that word. And look, it unfortunately, landscape, sorry, Alex, does seem to be the first thing that goes. And it's either reduced or it's removed. The number of projects I've worked on where the irrigation system's been taken out of the planting, and then they come back 5 years later and everybody's going, well, the plants are all died. This landscape architect was useless. It's like, well, so what happens when you don't water your plants? So if you could each give me a bang for my buck in terms of Indigenous engagement on a project, what's the one thing that you would say is absolutely necessary to keep that is going to make a significant contribution to the cultural identity of the project that you're working on? Liam, I'm going to start with you.
For me, it's those opportunities for continued practice. So, yes, we do have yarning circles and are quite often used in health. They're very good for a number of reasons. But I think that native plants as well, where we can, often they create an opportunity around soil health for dormant species to come back, which is what we saw at Susan Wakil. And about a year later, they started to see black cockatoos coming back through the space, which had not been seen for many, many years.
It just makes sense, right? You put back the plants that have always grown there. It just makes sense. Alex? Sorry, Brad, I'll come to you later.
I'll probably come back to trust again, and the value that actually creates. That as Lancaster Park, we design a myriad of spaces outside the building that to accommodate First Nations people who do not want to walk into that building. And so if the relationship with the community before the building even arrives is strong, people that need healthcare will come more freely without inhibitions and actually get the care that they need, or come and visit people that need care. Now, we can create the spaces around the outside, but if we don't have those foundations of what the community thinks about the place, then we're really pushing more uphill.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, connection with placemaking and sidelines probably one of the fundamental part of the building that I think you go over. It's sometimes something overlooked, and that could mean many things. So that could mean a true wayfinding, something as simple as following the daylight. It could mean silage. It could mean clarity of access, clarity of arrival, bringing light into the middle of the building. So quite often, maybe more often than not, we're seeing big, large building floor plates that really give it a perspective of where you are in the country. You really need to start to think about opening buildings to the environment, opening sidelines, and really connecting with the place that we're building. And inherently, that's just such a simple move that could be made more often, and therefore you would get the benefit psychologically, physically, and improvements in functionality within those buildings. But I'd probably say that's probably a first fault to the designs.
Yeah, that's great. So look, with Bathurst Hospital, which is what you can see on screen, it's only it's out to tender at the moment. So we're hoping to start construction beginning of next year. It's not a 10-year project, thank God. So, and with Bathurst and some of the other projects we're seeing being developed more recently, we, in talking to the elders and in understanding the community, we developed a form that was less orthogonal. We've got curves, baby, and less institutional. And look, a lot of that was because we were hearing stories about the local community just not wanting to go into hospital. They don't trust institutions. They don't trust governments. They don't trust, those traditional oblong rectangle buildings that are straight lines and white and clinical, and they just don't trust them. So that's where you'll start to see more and more, I think, particularly in those regional areas, hospitals with curves and hospitals that are dug into the landscape a lot more and engage a lot more with the landscape. There is pressure to keep straight lines. Builders don't tend to like it, don't know why. Health infrastructure gets a bit antsy about it, and quantity surveyors are, we have a running joke with the quantity surveyors on Bathurst where they say, we're getting rid of the curves this week. No, we're not. So there is pressure on us to stick to the straight lines. So why do you think it's so culturally important that we shift to something less rectilinear? Does it matter? Should we be doing it more? Brad, I'm going to go to you. You're the design architect here.
It's really since work. I don't think it's predicated on having curves that appeal to Indigenous community. And this happened to come out of one of those sessions that we had with the elders, very illuminating projects. And used to hearing the story of Australian country, particularly around the Bathurst city itself, and understanding why this facility, the code was the fortunate, fortunate the community that weren't seeking health care because of that work. It gets hesitant to come to the building in the first place, and hearing those stories of pretty horrific stories to be quite frank of elderly just not feeling welcome to seek medical treatment. So out of that, their response was very much, could we soften the building? Could we make this feel more welcoming to our VNG. And we decided that we thought the right move was to create a more organic core and used health of the landscape and more texture and to make it then reach to the sun, shade, etc. of the building. And when we showed the images, the first reaction was, "Oh, have they listened?
Yeah.
He haven't put an initiative so what we've been asking." Well, ironically, at the same time, if you said, I solely evacuated Aboriginal health services, we do need to be mindful that it is here so much broader part of the community. So there's always balance, balancing acting to side healthy.
Alex, is it important? Does it help with the landscape? Should we go back to straight lines?
It gives us the job to influence form a little poll. But I think the hospital environment is very important from a landscape experience to not be destinational from point A to point B, especially when you're outside. You're outside generally to sort of escape from the work or the treatment or whatever it is inside. Obviously, if you're trying to find the front door, it's a different scenario. But in the broader context of the landscape, that having some movement and some, I suppose, experience or journeying throughout the landscape allows people to feel as though they're in a natural environment and in the garden environment, whether it's a native garden in terms of country or something that's a little bit more domestic, that it's not getting from A to B and you're on site and you're part of, everyone's experience while you're there. So we would naturally sort of tend to fall into an organic fall. And that allows for rooms that are like to be created for people to go and to use. But at the same time, then we can also use it to break down contours and connect with country and to have an experience of movement throughout the brain, should that be possible on the site.
Yeah, I mean, the landscape, the natural landscape of a site is rarely a straight line. So by looking at, what the land is, of what the land was, we're definitely not talking about straight lines. So, Liam, is it important?
So this year, South East City LHC put out a series of plaques at the front of every hospital and health service. That was a directive out of New South Wales Health. And within that plaque was an acknowledgement of the role that New South Wales Health had played within elements like the stolen generation. So I think for me, and that's a great example of place-based, wanting more curvature. But I think, and I'll use the technical term, less governmenty for a building, because for so long, government buildings had been places of not good business. And so it's really more about moving away from a government building aesthetic to a place that is more welcoming actually for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I know we're talking about First Nations people are making buildings that are better for First Nations, but it's one of those things where what's good for them is also good for us. And, as I said, we're talking about biophilic design principles. We're talking about good design for everybody. And it's one of the things that I love about designing the country is it's actually beneficial for everybody. So look, what else can we do? It's not just about the architecture, it's about other things that we do in our own life and our own spaces. Alex, Arcadia's got a great policy, employment policy that I'd like you to talk a bit about.
Yeah, sure. Okay, we don't have a RAT, and the reason that is that underneath advice from some people that work with us and people that collaborated with us, but making people, is that our business sort of moves at a rate where a RAP would probably hold us back a little bit too much. So our Indigenous strategy is still governed by external mediators, you might call, who monitor the goals that we set out on an annual basis. But where it's sort of start is with our education policy. So we're going to have a scholarship at every university in Australia for Indigenous landscape architecture that offers landscape architecture. We started that 7 years ago, and this year, or yesterday actually, we found out we've got our first recipient coming through WA, which will be the 8th person in Australia. So there's a significant shift, and I suppose sense of Indigenous people coming into the landscape fraternity and being able to hopefully share their knowledge, but also work closer than we can with communities. The other sort of components that we try to do as much as possible is to bring other people that we work with across our business in that are First Nation. So that our caterers, our property solicitor, and there's a few other sort of people that we work with and have contracts with along the way. Our cleaning contractors, Icon Planning Services, home in First Nations people. Their policy, I suppose, is what attracted us to them. All of their planning products, or all the paper stuff, is supplied by First Nations companies. So there's more that we can do than just designing and practicing our craft and engaging with communities within our businesses.
I think that's fantastic. It's just, it speaks to the authenticity of what you're trying to do, which is fantastic. Brad, I'm going to come to you. One of the best things I love about Brad is he's renovating his house at the moment. Do you want to tell us what you did with your house renovation?
Well, I've been looking at each the steps in my hand with design and so we raised that's really very serious before we began construction on the project. Look, it was a way draw for us the family to really connect with the community. That's the Darawal people out in Northern Wollongong. It was also a moment to teach, I guess, our children about that much longer standing history and heritage that the place had and from her old cultures. And so that really a moment time to give our children some perspective of it, or they'll remember old back on that particular environment. But I think ultimately we really hear about how these ideas and notions of changes onto our next generation. And I think that's just a really important message that we have design professionals to continue to build that momentum, continue to build and grow our junior to the younger architects and designers and long for anyone in need. Really coming through is that it's such a broad pile improving the outcomes for business people and also delivering one building of that because this year better and perform better, function better within our environment.
Yeah, it's great. Liam, what have we missed?
So around opportunities.
Yeah. Anything else you want to tell us, mate?
Oh,
How long have we got?
look, I think some of those things around those interactions with community, have a good understanding of where you are. Elements like pronunciation, understanding significant events that have happened, both where you work, where you live, perhaps in the locations of the projects. I love the idea. Well, there's a big move away from RAPs to strategies, more fit for purpose, RAPs were initially built with the function of government and large corporate, but they don't always fit for all organisations, but they're a good start. So you're moving more towards a strategy, and the strategy might look at, how can we as an organisation be a good neighbour and be a good ally in the space. So we look, procurement, both at an organisation level, at a project level, employment, education pathways, increasing cultural capability within an organisation. So it's cultural capability is not a destination for all of us. It's something that you will always be working on.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really important to remember is it's not just about, as I said, the consultation phase of the project. It's actually every day what you do, how you do things, and really being open to learning about where we as a country have come from which I think is really important.